one.
I missed the actual verbatim statement because I was on the train. He actually apparently has said that you discussed it once, Norman, on December the 9th. And then from then...
My position.
Yes, I understand, but he did chip in there, which people would have heard.
Yes,
I'll bring
indeed.
you back. Why do you say it was disgraceful?
Because here we have a situation where the government are expecting people to try and get jobs with 3.5 million people plus unemployed, and he's actually making remarks that actually turn British people against those who apparently happen to come from foreign origin. I'll tell you something, Norman. What you're trying to encourage is a free-for-all where people price each other out of the job market, where they actually get to a situation where they'll take anything in order to get a job, and then we'll blame each other for not being adequate enough to actually have created the jobs in the first place. And remarks about foreigners are an extremely dangerous way of proceeding in debating a serious issue about the crisis in morale facing young people.
Norman David, will you answer?
Let me just repeat very calmly what I said, that there are places where there are jobs which have been taken by people who have come from Europe, perhaps from Spain, perhaps from wider afield, and found work in this country. Now, that doesn't detract for a moment from the fact that quite clearly there are not enough jobs in this country to go round. Quite clearly, the overwhelming majority of people who are out of work are seeking work and would be darn glad to find work. And one sees that most markedly in the north of the country, in Scotland and the other parts which are most strongly affected. But I made the point just to Antonia that there are cases where perhaps her sympathy was a little misplaced. Now,
well, Norman, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't think sympathy about the plight of the young is ever misplaced. It doesn't mean that you've got to be soft, but I think sympathy is not misplaced.
Well, I've got every sympathy for the young. Let me make that absolutely clear. Well, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have fought in Cabinet and won in Cabinet to launch the YTS scheme, nor to increase the scope of the community programme.
Tell us more.
Well, are we going to be told, or is it going to be double?
Well, that is the fact, and I believe in that very strongly indeed, and that YTS is, apart from anything which it may do to ease the problems of unemployment, is primarily a training scheme, because as a kid that left school at 16 myself, I feel that we have never done enough for the school leaver of 16 these days, who very often has not had a good deal at school, and is ill-equipped and ill-trained to take the jobs which are available. And I feel passionately about that, and I get very angry indeed with people that suggest to the contrary.
Gentleman there with the moustache, please.
I'd like to ask when we're going to find out what the true figure of the unemployment is. At the moment, there's a terrific amount of moonlighting going on. There's also a hell of a lot of women who have had a young child, who have now gone on the unemployment list, who have no intention of ever getting a job.
No, they're not on the list.
Well,
they're not on the list.
Let's not be diverted into that extremely interesting statistical thing. Let's proceed on the assumption there's a hell of a lot too much unemployment. And
that's common ground.
That's right. Well, that's why I made the point. Sir, yes. No, you speak. Your voice is large enough without a microphone. Come on.
In his infinite wisdom, Mr. Tebbit just took the credit for starting the YTS. Is there a follow-on he can suggest to the other 3 million unemployed? There are people who can anything be done for them?
Yes, indeed. A great deal can be done. Just let's take, for example, one particular firm, which is a very good example of what can be done. A company like Jaguar, not long ago in danger of going into extinction, because the motor cars they were producing were rotten motor cars, and people, if they bought one, wouldn't buy a second. There was a chap in New York who was actually making a living rewiring Jaguar motor cars before they were delivered to their customers. And the Jaguar company was going down the drain. Now, under the leadership of a man like John Egan, with the cooperation of the workforce, and after a bit of reluctance, just a bit, of the trades unions, that company has been turned round. It is now taking on extra workers. It is profitable. It has sold more cars in the States than ever before, and it's a growing company. Now, the message of that for the 3 million unemployed in this country is that it can be done. There is no reason why we in this country should buy more than half our cars from foreign suppliers.
The lady up there,
we could
we're
supply
never-
them to ourselves if we would really buckle down to the job of competing in our industry in the way that the management and the workforce have buckled down to it in a
And the
firm like
Americans-
Jaguar.
One
the
more
Americans-
one more question from the audience, please. One more question from the audience. The lady in the cream jacket, please.
Thank you, Sir Robin. I'd like to ask Mr. Tevitt, why doesn't the government, in fact, encourage companies to job share, make it worthwhile? I know lots of people who would be prepared to share a job and take people off the unemployment roll.
Have you got a short answer
Yes,
to that?
I introduced such a scheme, and it is available, but it has not been widely taken up. And the reason, I think, is that many people are unwilling to go to half a job because it means half a pay packet. Now, if it means a whole pay packet for half a job, that puts our costs up again at a time when our German and Japanese and French and Italian competitors and Americans are getting theirs down.
One more
And that would not add to the number of people in work, it would put more people out of work.
One more sentence from you, David Owen, please, on this issue.
Well, I think the Norman's past record is not a very good one of sympathy and understanding for young people. You, after all, were the one who told them all to get on their bike. You've
No,
now
David, I did
elaborated-
not, and you know that that is not true,
well,
and it's a really rather
well,
striking,
Get on
silly
that
remark.
Jaguar, I think.
well, now you...
Just in order to avoid argument, I was there. What Mr. Tebbit said was that in the 30s, his father got on his bike and went to look for work.
That's right.
That was a historical. But why he said it if he didn't mean he wanted people to do it himself, but that's another matter.
by inference. The basic facts of it
Quickly.
matter are, Norman, I put a direct question to you. Why are you not doubling the community programme? And are you going to do it? And if not, why don't you get on with it and do it soon?
There are 10,000 vacancies at the moment open on the community programme, untaken up. I hope they'll be taken up. We will always look at the possibility of doing so, but it has quite a substantial cost.
It is
And
a
if only-
recommendation to your government from inside
it is.
to double it.
But if only we could get greater cooperation from some of those concerned with the community programme. For example, in many areas, the trades unions are blocking community programmes. They've been doing it in part of my area of London.
I bet you do it before the election.
They have been doing it in part of my area of London, and I think if we could get more cooperation, we could get more people into that
I want
programme.
to call
they
one,
don't
I want to
just want
call
a
one
job
more
for a
speaker,
year,
one
do
more
they,
speaker
Norman?
very briefly for the end of the programme. Peter Denman, who is a branch secretary of the Transport and General Workers Union.
Thank you. I would like to know what the panel's view is on the omission of Band-Aid organiser Bob Geldof from the UES Honours List.
David Blunkett, right or wrong, one word or two?
Well, forgive me, 2 words. I think it's a shame that they didn't give him it if they've been able to give previous American presidents like Eisenhower the awards. If people like MBs and CBs and OBs and think that they should be rewarded for that sort of service, which I think is much more useful than giving knighthoods to people who have helped the Conservative Party get to power and
Antonia?
advertising.
Yeah, so honours cost the government nothing, unlike most things, and therefore, if he wanted it, and I gather only from the press that he did, yes, he should certainly have had it. Of course he should have had
Had what?
it. An award.
What?
Whatever he wanted.
Well, you said one word.
Well, I know I did, but nobody
Shabby.
paid me.
Shabby is the word I'd use,
Shabby.
but I basically think that the honours system, if it is to survive, has to carry popular support. And I think in an honours list where the Prime Minister makes a knight of somebody who has changed her voice and her hairstyle and can ignore one of the most altruistic, spontaneous movements of young people's commitment to do something about famine, inspired by this man, shows her values more than eloquently than anything else and is just about as damaging as the way she's handled Michael Heseltine's resolution.
Let's not get into that again. Norman Tebbit, very quickly.
Just two aspects to this. First, as David knows, from his experience as a minister under Harold Wilson, honours lists have been perhaps abused in the past. Secondly, I should say that the reason that Bob Geldof could not receive an award in this honours list was because he is not a British citizen.
Well, Eamon Andrews got an award.
just
Terry Wogan probably got an award too.
Robin, even you got an award, so anything can happen.
I'm not a foreigner.
the point is that there are occasions when foreigners receive honorary awards, but by a very long tradition and a curious tradition, this never happens during the New Year's honours list. It happens at the other honours list during the year. Now, whether Mr. Geldorf will qualify or not, nobody at this stage knows.
Can I just
but
ask
the reason that he did not qualify on this occasion was because he is not a British citizen.
I've got to go now. It's the end of the programme, this very big programme. Thank you all very, very much indeed. And may I say on a personal note to Norman Tebbit, whatever you may think of his views, you've heard in the programme, he's going to hospital for a fortnight to be repaired. Not because of today's cabinet meeting, but because
I'm going away to hide from it all, actually.
but because of the serious injuries which he suffered, and we wish him well. And thank you for watching this programme, this 200th edition. And finally, we got a few extra minutes. Finally, for your brief amusement, here are just a few of those moments of wit or wisdom which you may have relished in some of our previous programmes, beginning with Mr. Francis Pym during the general election campaign. Mr. Pym was then Foreign Secretary, and on question time, he dropped this memorable clangor.
I think landslides, on the whole, don't produce successful governments. 1945 was the obvious one, this massive landslide to Labour. I think that was extremely unfortunate, so I don't think that's likely to happen.
You don't create jobs by pouring money into silly things. Indeed, if you tax successful firms in order to back ill-judged ones, you're actually threatening more jobs in the long term, even though your motives may be the highest.
What was a silly thing that the GLC put its money in so far as job creation was concerned?
And I said one, I can't remember.
Yeah, you can't remember. In last Thursday's general election, Mr. Benn was defeated after some 30 years in the Commons, and he cannot be a contestant in Labour's leadership election.
Probably be a little unpopular tonight, but I'm an Argentinian citizen living in this country, and I feel that there is no danger, either physical or to the properties of the residents of the islands, as I know that the Argentine army is composed mostly of people like me.
And our submarine found the Belgrano, and we were asked for permission to sink it because it was a threat to our carriers. And we did sink it.
Sir. Yes.
I hope it's not conceited to disagree with Bernard Levin.
No, it's the acme of reasonableness. Do you think there's any room for Derek Hatton in the Labour Party?
With the greatest respect, I think Derek should go and form his own party somewhere else and fight for traction.
What paper do you buy?
I buy The Guardian, The Times and The Morning Star.
Well, there speaks the reasonable average man.
Everything that we have achieved as working people, we've had to fight for them. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I think Simon is right. Peter, I'm sorry. Peter is right.
Clive.
You're right, whoever you are.
Well, it's really the same thing if everybody assumes...
Quite right, it was a silly question I was asking.
And to place a majority over a minority in authority may be wrong, but it is equally wrong to place, as this arrangement does, a minority in a position of hegemony over the majority, and it will not work.
To be a successful politician, and you and I both, by definition, failures. I was just about to say it myself.
I think that nowadays the really dangerous fascists are those on the left.
Alan Taylor, what do you think about this? Coming back to B.Z. Balogan's original question.
To tell you the truth, I don't think anything about it at all.
If they do this on a Sunday, our normal bill is going to go up colossal because they'll demand double pay for Sunday. I don't agree with it at all, and nothing. Sunday is meant for worship, the same as Saturday for Jewish people.
And Rule 41, he has decimated this rule book. You talk about a ballot, you talk about democracy. I fought for trade union rights, and this man has destroyed the trade union rights of this country. That's what
support Mrs. Thatcher for the reasons that Eric Heffer said, that she is a lady who knows her mind, speaks her mind, and gets things done.
We certainly have got Mrs. Thatcher there, and in fact, the cause of women has been put back 50 years because Mrs. Thatcher's there.
My party, long before Mr Tebbit and the Conservative Party picked it up, came out in favour of people having the right to ballot on the question of union officials and on the question of strikes.
And which
If I may
party
say
was
so,
this? Was this the
you
Labour
don't-
Party or was this the SDP?
SDP, and don't be cheap.
David Blunkett?
My dog's gone to sleep.
Edward Buchanan? What do you think of what they've said? Do you think they're a lot of smug fuddy-duddies?
Well, they seem very complimentary about the question, but they haven't actually given me any answers. Which
Why do you think they've got where they have? Well, lovely, and all human life is here. In next week's Question Time, we will have Norman Lamont MP, who is Minister of State for Defence Procurement, that is, if he keeps that position under the new Secretary of State, Harriet Harman MP, Labour's Social Services spokesman, Des Wilson, President-elect of the Liberal Party, and Donald Trelford, editor of The Observer. That's in next Thursday's Question Time at 9:55 on BBC One. Thank you for your company on this memorable evening. Good night.